and welcome to Film Fam, inspired by true events. I'm Heather, married to Brian, mother to Zoe.
Hi, I'm Brian, married to Heather, father to Zoe.
And I'm Zoe, daughter to Brian and Heather.
I'm going to cut this part out because I need to make my screen smaller so that I can see my whole family while I'm talking to them.
I always just look at my notes. You have to see our faces while you're also reading your notes?
No, I have my notes in a
Yeah.
very small square in between all
need-
of our faces.
I need to be able to look at it. Dad doesn't care about looking at us.
No, not
apparently.
even a little.
Wow. Weird.
Wow.
Not only do I want to look at your and Zoe's face, I also want to look at my face sometimes.
Your face looks
So,
nice.
Thank you.
I like
It's not my best angle, but it's
Wait,
fine.
you
It's
think
just
from slightly below looking
It's the
up
worst.
at your chin is not the best angle?
No, this is the best angle.
Ah, yeah, it is.
Today we're talking about the 2017 Disney animated film Moana, which takes place somewhere in the Polynesian Triangle. That is a triangle created by connecting Hawaii, New Zealand, and Easter Island. And some of the islands inside the Polynesian Triangle that you might have heard of are Samoa, Tonga, the Cook Islands, Tahiti, Bora Bora, and Tuvalu. So my true history, I'm going to start back a little ways and work my way forward. Human society in Polynesia can be traced to 900 BCE.
Oh, we're
in
going
Tonga.
way, way back.
Pretty far back. In Tonga, Samoa, and Fiji, oldest things that they were able to trace was 900 BCE. The Polynesian people used wayfinding, which they illustrate in Moana when she goes out and learns from Maui how to follow the stars and everything to navigate. It's called wayfinding. And the Polynesian people use wayfinding to navigate thousands of miles in a canoe to these small islands in the vast Pacific Ocean. So they were coming originally from the area around Taiwan and somehow finding these little tiny islands in this huge blue ocean. And not only finding it, but then going back and forth to bring people and to populate these islands. Wayfinding was passed down as an oral tradition, and it's thought to use the stars, weather, bird flight patterns, the direction of swells in the ocean, sea turtle migrations, the color of the sea and the sky, how clouds might cluster around an island, and things like that to navigate through the ocean because there was nothing else. And this is like basically using Stone Age technology level canoes. Then there was a gap, and it's called the long pause of 1,000 years before the people in Western Polynesia voyaged out again on their boats to populate the other islands in the Polynesian Triangle. And that was like the Cook Islands, Hawaii, New Zealand, and Easter Island. But after the long pause, once they actually started voyaging again, they discovered and settled nearly every inhabitable island in the Central and Eastern Pacific Ocean within a century or so. So there was this long pause of 1,000 years. And then once that ended, for whatever reason, they went out and went to pretty much every single island and started populations there. There's a lot of debate as to why there was this long pause and why the Polynesian people started voyaging again. Like, they don't know why it stopped. They don't know why it started.
So Moana's
But-
kind of like
Right, telling
to
that
answer
story.
That.
Right. It's kind of at the end of the long pause that Moana, the movie, takes place. I think in the movie, I didn't have a sense that any of this really. I just knew like, well, we were not we were not voyaging anymore. And then we start, but I didn't have a sense
Right.
that it was like 1,000 years and that it was all of the Polynesian people that were in Samoa and Tonga. Like, I didn't know that how
Right.
historical it was.
It didn't occur to me. I figured they're telling a story, and they set it on an unnamed island, and they're involving the mythology and this and that, and they're writing a story. It didn't occur to me that that story is itself a myth to explain something that we don't know, which a lot of myths try to do.
Right.
Yeah.
Moana takes place when the long pause ends, basically. It's their story for that. And the audience gets to learn about this history of ocean voyaging and wayfinding, as well as some other cultural aspects of the Polynesian people. So if you've seen Moana, which I hope you have, and if you haven't, gosh,
Spoiler
it's
Why
great.
not?
It's great. You may remember that Moana leaves her island because like a darkness is coming in and it's killing off the fish. And then eventually I think it even gets into the trees and stuff like that. It's like, and she has to find out like what's happening.
Won't someone consider the coconut?
And that could have been based on one of the theories about why the long pause ended. And one of the theories is that there might have been a toxic algae bloom that started killing off all the fish. And then so they were forced to sail away to find new places where the algae bloom wasn't happening. So that's kind of the creators of Moana might have been like, oh, let's pick one of these and then make it more like a magical supernatural.
right.
Sure.
So they might have heard of this story through a group that they had assembled called the Oceanic Story Trust. It's written that this group included anthropologists, academics, educators, linguists, master navigators, and cultural advisors, and that they were leaned on to advise about the culture and history to help make the final film feel authentic and believable within the world that was created. One of the Polynesian traditions that the Oceanic Story Trust consulted on was the tradition of Polynesian tattoos. So, Zoe, do you know that the word tattoo is a Polynesian word?
I did not know that. Now I do.
Yeah, it's an onomatopoeia for the sound of the stick hitting the comb into the skin of the person being
As
tattooed.
they hit it, it goes tattoo, tattoo.
No,
Tattoo,
because I
tattoo.
saw that in the movie. I don't know if I'd ever before the movie seen the visual of like someone giving a tattoo like that. But it totally makes sense that like, humans haven't had tattoo guns for very long.
Right. So there isn't just one Polynesian tradition of tattooing. Each island has their own specific and very meaningful tattoo traditions. All of Polynesia has some shared culture that's like language, culture, their beliefs, and the concept of tattooing. And it's very similar, but there's also specific differences for each island that are unique. In general, tattoos can indicate your status, that you've achieved sexual maturity, what your genealogy is, your rank in society. And for ancient Polynesian people, nearly everyone had a tattoo, well, all adults. And that's what I'm going to be talking about because you actually do see that Moana's father has tattoos. Her grandmother has this beautiful stingray tattoo that's very important to the story. And Maui, the demigod, also has tattoos. And I wanted to talk about the true story behind these tattoos in Polynesian culture. So ancient Polynesian people, they had a belief in something called mana, which is like life force or your essence. They believed that tattoo artists had some control over mana. Mana kind of is like influences what you're good at and how good you are at it. It's like your power, kind of.
In role-playing games, it's like you have strength, life that you can expend, and strength, and then mana is like points that you can put towards spells and other kinds of things like that.
Yeah, it's
And
like it's like your personal power.
Yeah, I
Right,
think
right.
probably a lot of people know about mana through Magic the Gathering. At least
Oh, okay.
all my friends that were boys when I was 13 years old, and I
Well, I don't know. I don't know how magic talked about mana or not, but for the Polynesian people, it was in natural objects and it was in people. And some people actually were considered to have more mana than other people, but you could accumulate mana by going through rituals. And tattooing was one of the rituals that could give you more mana and could also help like direct your mana.
that's
So
lovely.
tattoo artists were thought to have some control over this. And so there was a whole ritual to like tattooing you, and they had to say, like, they weren't just putting down ink. There was like symbolism and rituals as you were getting your tattoo that imbued you with this power, your mana, while you were getting the tattoo. So it was actually a very sacred experience that all Polynesian people were doing. And one of the things that I really learned a lot about this concept of mana, and another force that kind of complements it, which is called tapu, which is where we get the word taboo.
Oh.
Right. Tattoo and taboo are both Polynesian words. that were brought back by Captain James Cook, who sailed and found the Polynesian islands for England. Found them to England. They were already found to the people who lived there. So tapu is when something is so holy or sacred that there are special restrictions around it. So like a graveyard is taboo. Like
Right.
you can't just go do whatever you want there.
Right, and the way we use it now is to mean like maybe you can't talk about it, or like there is a sort of, I don't know if it's now associated only with like reverence. Sometimes it's like, well, that thing is bad, so it's taboo. But I like that it came from this sense of like that's not something that is just like lightly used.
Right, right. So one example of that is in Tahiti and maybe in some other places but I learned about this from reading about Tahiti. Infants were taboo because they came out of the body, and anything that came out of your body was a little bit taboo, including blood, which I'll get to as far as when you're tattooing blood, you can get raised blood on yourself. But an infant came out of your body and it was recently in contact with the divine. So it's like their sacredness was like just too much. It was like, this is too much. Babies are taboo. You have to go through all these rituals to kind of reduce the sacredness of the infant so that it can just be part of regular society. And there's all these rituals over time that kind of like make it so that it can be kind of like balanced just into the normal group rather
It's
than
like
it being
everyone
this.
is born holy.
Right. And like so holy that like you can't just touch it willy-nilly.
Right.
So as the children in Tahiti, they matured, they eventually received a small tattoo on the inside of each arm above their elbow that, quote, sealed off the body from its taboo state. So this tattoo signaled that like all the rituals that they had to do around it being a taboo infant were done. And now you're fine. You could hang out with people, you could eat however, you could go places, you're fine. You're not in any kind of taboo state anymore.
But you're also not as divine anymore.
Right. Right. So taboo restrictions or taboos were things that you would avoid to protect your mana. And blood was taboo. So tattooing, which produces blood, like I said, blood gets raised up on the skin when you're doing this. It involved both mana and taboo. It was a mixture of both things happening at once. And this can give you an idea of why tattooing in the Polynesian culture is just much more than decorating your body. It's considered like very sacred and very essential to their culture. So if you've seen Moana, you know that the demigod Maui, he's very tatted up, and his tattoos were earned through these various exploits. And like I said, Moana's father had tattoos and Moana's grandmother. And there was a scene that Zoe talked about with a young man getting a tattoo while he's lying on his stomach. And Moana's like sitting there holding his hand, like saying, you can do it, and he's like, ah. So in that scene, which I looked at, the tattoo artist was just the tattoo artist, this guy getting the tattoo in Moana. But normally the tattoo artist had helpers who would kind of like flatten the skin out so that it would be flat while they were doing their designs, and who would wipe away the blood, and who basically did what Moana was doing and just giving him emotional support. Because the pain of being stabbed with like sharpened boar's teeth dipped in ink over and over and over and hit with like with a mallet into your body over a large portion of your skin was very painful. And there was also
like nowadays, like we have, maybe they did it like that then too, but like I know people who've like gotten tattoos who have to like do it in rounds and sessions on many days, and that's not even for like, that's for what we think of as bigger tattoos, but that's not like even across their whole body or anything.
Yeah, a tattooing session would go from dawn until dusk and last for 5 sessions spread out over 10 days.
Wow.
Yeah, well, think about the buzzing, just the sound of when we do a tattoo. Were you there when your mom got her tattoo?
I was, yeah.
Okay, so listen to the buzzing sound. If you can remember that, the frequency of the zzz, each one of those in the frequency is a piercing by the needle. Now imagine that instead of that tool that does it however many times per second, you've got a boar's tooth and something that they're tapping it. is maybe 3 times a second. And so
It's
it's
gonna
going to
take
be
a lot longer.
like 10 times as long, three times a second instead of say 30.
Right. And these boar tooth things, they were like combs kind of. So they had multiple points.
Okay, so that
Okay.
helps.
And there was also different sizes depending on if you needed a thick line or a thin line or points. They had a variety of different tools that they
Very
used.
cool.
But yes, the tattoos would take up a significant portion of their skin depending on what island they're from. So for Samoan people, the tattoos went from their belly button all the way down to just below the knee.
Mm-hmm.
It was like pants, basically.
Yeah.
So sometimes these tattoos would take weeks or even a few months, depending on how much tattooing they were getting done. But then once it was over, there would be this big celebration to honor like the person's courage and the endurance of getting through this. And then before the celebration, there would be rituals that would remove the taboo state from the person who had been tattooed.
Mm-hmm.
Because
Blood.
while you were getting tattooed, you were in a taboo state. And
Okay.
in Maori,
Because of the blood?
because of the blood and just because it's a sacred thing you're doing. So you become taboo because you're in this sacred state. And in New Zealand with the Maori, you couldn't like touch food. So there'd be people there who would feed you while you were getting the tattoo, because while you're getting it, you couldn't touch food and then ingest it, because then you would be putting taboo stuff into your body. So it took a few months for the tattooed skin to heal, and their family of the tattooed person would wash it with salt water and massage it. And they would help you with walking or sitting because the inflamed skin would be so painful that any movement at all. I mean, think about you're getting your whole waist, your legs,
Right.
even your scrotum in some of these places were getting tattooed. Like it was a whole fucking, it was a lot.
And someone has to stretch the skin.
Yes, it was a lot. It's a lot. And it would take like 6 months before you could really see even the design, because you'd be so, your skin would be so inflamed.
Man.
And it would take like a year before it was fully healed.
Well, fucking badass.
You know,
It is badass.
I think that I prefer the way we do it now.
Yeah.
If I were to get one, I would do it the way we do it now.
Where you don't do
think.
all of it. You don't
Or
do
not my
your
scrotum.
pants, or
You're not going to
what do
get
you mean
full-
the way you do it now? Where you
I
have
think
a
she
gun?
With the
means with the
machines
machine
and-
rather
okay,
than
yeah.
And maybe antibiotics if you get infected,
Well,
or
I
just topical antibiotic
Well,
cream.
you don't have to do it. It's not your culture.
That's true.
It's
I
the
have to
Polynesian
My
say-
culture actually forbids it. It's
Yeah.
taboo.
Yeah, it's taboo
Oh.
for Jews to get.
Well, Well, I would love to get a tattoo someday. I do really love the thing. I feel that for like pierced ears too, where it's this some sort of sense of like going through pain for something awesome kind of enhances it in some way. I think that's also some of like the magic or the spirituality around it. I can understand, because it's like you're altering your body in this permanent way, but it also like it takes time, it takes ritual, and it takes pain, but then like it's something you've gone through. It's not just like, oh, I drew this thing on myself. It's like a whole to do that really feels like maybe like you earned having it.
I think for some people, that is how they do take it seriously. I think for some people it is just
right.
putting a picture on your body that you're into. I think, but for the Polynesian people, it was very like culturally
Right.
important in this huge way.
Right.
As I said, in Tonga, warriors were tattooed from their waist to their knees, and they used geometrical patterns in areas of solid black.
Okay.
In Samoa, it said the tattooed artist was an inherited position, so like from father to son, and the tattoos also were at the waist and extended below the knees. And Samoan women were also tattooed, often on the hands or the lower parts of their body, with geometrical flower-like patterns. But when Christian missionaries came to Tonga, they banned the practice of tattooing, and the Tongan art of tattooing was pretty much lost.
Oh, wow.
Really,
But the
just
Samoan-
ruining everything always.
Yeah, I mean, but the Samoan tradition has been unbroken over 2,000 years.
Oh wow.
And the tools and the techniques are almost exactly the same. And the skill has been passed on from father to son. And they managed to keep it going, where in a lot of the other Polynesian islands, they did not. In Tahiti, tattooing generally began in adolescence and would take a number of years to complete. And boys and girls both got tattoos when they passed into sexual maturity. All the symbols in Tahitian tattoos are based on the 4 elements, and the symbols mean something different depending on what kind of person it's on. So, like a fish on a warrior or a fisherman would mean different things.
Okay.
And the tattoo artist is able to represent the person's genealogy and rank and things like that with these symbols. Tahiti was one of the places that pretty much lost the art, but then they were able to, with research and scholars and drawings and stuff, able to go back and try to find it again and figure out what it was.
Well, that's good.
Yeah.
Because the art of tattoo was really central to Tahitian culture, in the face of missionaries kind of trying to suppress tattooing, the Tahitian people had tattoo rebellions in the early to mid 19th century to kind of assert their sovereignty and to like keep their old ways. And the leaders of this tattoo rebellions were comprised of an elite social group of bards, poets, tribal historians, and priests who were dedicated to Oro, the god of war.
Fuck yeah.
Ooh.
And they would travel around Tahiti asking for offerings for the purpose of mounting large festivals to honor their patron deity, Oro. And they were infamous for their, quote, promiscuously flamboyant and bacchanalian pursuits
Uh-oh.
and their rigid adherence to traditional practices like tattooing.
I love these guys. Can we be friends?
They are. They sound awesome, right? Well, the British missionary Ellis, writing in 1830, reported, "The simple act of tattooing or marking the skin was in itself no breach of the peace, but it was connected to their former idolatry and always attended with practices of abominable vices, and on this account it was prohibited." So they prohibited by tattooing the word criminal on people's faces and hands if they got tattoos, or flaying the skin off where they had a tattoo. Or on one island, they dug 2 deep pits, 15 feet deep, and then they put a woman in one who had gotten tattooed and the tattoo artist in the other pit. And they just left them to die in these pits.
Wow.
The Maori culture, the facial tattoos were the most significant. Only those with the highest social standing would get the facial tattoos. They're called moko, and they're made by hitting a wooden chisel made from albatross or whale bone, and they hit it with a mallet, and it creates grooves in the skin. So it's not just a tattoo, it's actually groove
Scarification.
scars. And they really like the spiral shape, and so these different spiral shapes could also... They weren't just beautiful shapes. They were, again, showing your accomplishments, your rank, your ancestry, your marital status, like all this socially relevant information on the spirals that were carved into your skin. And women could also get moko on their chins, usually their lips or their nostrils. And then they had pigments that they would rub into it. The color of the pigment was unique to each family. And they kept it in these special ornately carved vessels called oko. And the oko was handed down within a family because they believed that the mana of the previous generation could be transferred to the next generation by using the same pigment when they could.
Wow.
It's like an ancestral thing.
It's very beautiful if you look at it. And it was considered like so profoundly sacred that some of the more prominent people who had moko tattoos, their heads would be preserved after death and kept in these ornate boxes by their family. It's called moko makai. And the dark side of this was that like the preserved heads would be taken as trophies in war with each other. But then they would also like use it in peace negotiations. So like, well, I'll trade you back your leader's head if you give me my leader's head. But after white Europeans came to New Zealand, they started trading or taking some of these heads for themselves as like curiosities. So then the whole tradition just had to be banned because they're like, this doesn't seem right. And so they
'Cause white
banned
people
it.
ruined it.
Right. Why do it if it's just going to be taken?
Right. So today there's a movement to get the Mokomakai repatriated, to get all the
Oh, yeah.
the heads that are anywhere outside of New Zealand back to New Zealand. So, as I said, each island had their own tattooing style. And even though Christian missionaries wiped it out almost everywhere, scholars and researchers went back and tried to recreate it, and they did to some extent. So Hawaiian and Samoan and Tongan tattoos have a repetitive geometric shapes of highly stylized designs inspired by nature, like millipedes, shells, birds, and flying foxes. Flying foxes are very sacred. And so it's almost like you can't necessarily look at it and say, oh, that looks like a millipede or that looks like a shell, because it's so
Symbolic.
highly, right. It's so highly stylized, but that's what they mean. And they would often get an animal that was sacred to their family, a tattoo of that animal, and then that would like further protect you if you had the sacred animal tattooed on you. Maori tattoos, like I said, use a spiral motif, and Tahitian tattoos were very rounded with arches and circles. And again, all these like shapes that just look abstract to us, or just like shapes, actually had specific meanings that the tattoo artist had to learn. And then they learned all these meanings, and then they also learned how to do all the rituals. So, a crossover between Christian missionaries trying to stamp out the cultural practice in the Polynesian Triangle. Over in England, tattooing was starting to be practiced on white people.
Didn't
So
that
Captain,
start with like sailors a lot, or is
yes,
that just
yes.
yeah.
So it's commonly thought that Captain James Cook, who first went to the Polynesian Islands and brought back information of that to England, he introduced tattooing to England. There had been a few people brought to England with tattoos before him. There was an Inuit woman from Labrador and an Inuit woman from the Baffin Islands. So 2 indigenous women from Canada and a man from the Philippines. But Cook's voyages were really popular, and the people who went on the voyages with him were like good artists and writers and stuff. And so it really popularized everything that was happening there in the South Pacific and brought general awareness of these practices. Sir Joseph Banks, who was Cook's science officer, he was a botanist. He wrote about the tattoos extensively, and he was a sir. He was like a nobleman in society who was very popular. And he wrote about it, and people was like, oh, this is interesting. Different people on Cook's voyages, people from England, they went back and forth, and they were like, oh, they started getting tattoos. And then a Polynesian man named Omai, he met Captain James Cook in 1769, and then he went with him back to England and was introduced to English society and stayed in England for 2 years. And they said Omai was renowned for his charm, quick wit, and good looks. And so lots of people got to see his tattoos, and that made it popular as well. That's how tattooing became associated with sailors, is because the first people getting it were people who were sailing with Captain Cook.
That makes sense.
There's also tattooing happening in different places, not just the Polynesian Islands, but the word tattoo comes from the Polynesian Triangle. In the United States, in the 1800s, most tattoos were done by Polynesian or Japanese amateurs, people who like knew how it was done but weren't raised in like officially doing it with like their father teaching them.
Right.
They hadn't been officially trained in their culture, but they knew how to do it. And during the Civil War, a German immigrant opened a tattoo parlor in New York, and then he ended up traveling from camp to camp and tattooing soldiers in the Civil War. And that's how it became fashionable for people in the military, service people, to get tattoos. So now we have sailors, and now we have service people, and this is the history of that. It was also fashionable for a little bit for the upper crust to get tattoos.
Really?
So, yes, in 1862, Albert, the Prince of Wales, later King Edward VII, he had a Jerusalem cross tattooed on his arm. And his son, Duke Clarence and Duke of York, later King George V, They visited Japan in 1882, and they both got dragons tattooed on their arms. And among the Russian royal family, Peter the Great, Catherine the Great, and Nicholas II all had tattoos.
Yeah, but those were tattoos of like caviar.
There was Winston Churchill's mother, Jenny, also had a tattoo of a snake coiled around her left wrist.
How freaking
Wow.
cool.
And by the turn of the 20th century, roughly 3/4 of fashionable New York City ladies had gotten similarly trendy tattoos, including butterflies, flowers, and dragons.
I did not know. You
According-
don't really see that in period dramas. They're never like, oh, here's my tattoo.
Yeah, it was like for during the Victorian age for a little bit, it was like cool to have a tattoo because it was expensive.
Right.
And you had to pay a lot of money to get this tattoo. And then once the cost started to come down, rich people were like, meh, I don't care anymore.
Sure, it's like lobster or rabbit. Some foods are abundant and poor people eat them, but then they're less abundant. Now they're scarce and only rich people eat them, and they're seen as
Fancy.
high class or low class
Right.
depending on when you are and how expensive they are.
That's very true. So in 1975 in the US, there were only 40 tattoo artists.
Wow.
And by 1980, 5 years later, there were more than 5,000.
Yeah.
I think we have 40 within 40 minutes of our house. I mean, there's a ton now. But the meaning of tattooing, this is basically what I want to get across, is that the tradition of tattooing in the US or England, I don't know about every other place and where white people live. So I'm just talking about US and England because that's the information that came from this Polynesian study I was doing. In Polynesia, they're considered a source of, they're considered sacred. And like you're strengthening your life force by getting these tattoos. Charles Degerium Perez, a Tahitian documentary filmmaker, said, I got my first tattoo at my 14th birthday, and I've been adding more ever since. It's a single armband that depicts the circle of life from birth to adulthood, to death, to reincarnation. All my tattoos are protection signs, symbols of nature and the world around us. They're meant to help gather more mana or life energy. I had a wave shape and an arrow on my right arm to give me more power and energy flowing into my mic while performing vocals, because he's also a singer.
Yeah, I am planning on getting a tattoo that reminds me of. At one point, I wrote a song and had Zoe sing it. And secretly, the whole sinister plot there was to set it up so that she would sing the words, I love you, at certain parts in the song, so that later on I could go in and take it apart and chop it up and have the waveform for my daughter singing, I love you. And what I intend to do is put that on my right arm so that it reads left to right, looking forward on my body. And if you've seen a waveform in a computer or something, you'll see that the quiet parts are flat lines and the loud parts are squiggles that go up and down. They vary above and below the line. So the flat line would go all the way around my arm, and the squiggles where she's singing I love you will be on the outside of my tricep, I suppose. So that if you were to read it forward, it would just go around forever, and Zoe would sing I love you forever.
I'm going to
That is
cry.
really sweet. Also, you could have just asked me to say the words.
You know, he loves to be sneaky and have surprises.
That whole 5-minute song, and I spent all that time writing it was just for that.
Oh, I'm sure. No other reason.
So sweet. Well,
I know, I can't with you.
so today there are also modern, what's called Neo-Polynesian or Pan-Polynesian designs. Like they might include a Maori spiral or a Samoan shark tooth in the same design.
Okay.
So they're Pan-Polynesian. And that could have an old meaning or it might create a new meaning, just depending. And also I wanted to say as an aside that Polynesian tattoos are not considered tribal tattoos. And if someone calls them tribal, that's incorrect. They don't call it that. The actor, The Rock, who voiced Maui in Moana, has some modern Neo or Pan-Polynesian inspired tattoos. They're not the actual like traditional Polynesian tattoos, but they're inspired. One is on his left shoulder into his chest and forearm, and it has different design elements that pay.
For those at home, Heather is gesturing to her right shoulder and chest.
She's not so good with left and right sometimes. It's okay.
I'm really not. Look, I have dyslexia, and that's one of the things we found out why I am always wrong.
And I have
about
to
my
point it out
left
because
and
I have this
right.
thing called being a jerk.
Oh, he's embarrassed because he was so cute a second ago.
I
Now he
cannot
wants-
be cute. I have to be mean.
Yeah, I know. I understand. Too bad.
Did you know about how I won't tell you if you know, but where some of Maui's tattoos come from?
Yes,
Okay.
we are going to talk about that.
Is
All
it
right.
Polynesia?
I'll let you say it.
Um,
In a
I
way.
was look.
I'm looking.
I am gesturing to my right side, but on the Rock's left side, he has some tattoos that tell the story of his like Samoan roots. He has a sun on his neck that's like, he says it's learning to appreciate his own journey. He has an eye on his chest that's fighting through struggles, and a bunch of different symbols that are each like a chapter in a story that include like stuff about his family. And it took 60 hours over 3 sessions to make this tattoo that's on his chest and
Wow.
arm. Yeah.
What? Wait, 60 hours over 3 sessions. He was doing 20-hour sessions?
20-hour
That's
sessions
fucking
on average.
crazy.
But they were probably not all equal sessions. So
Okay, look,
one or more was longer than that.
maybe I either wrote down wrong because I have dyslexia.
Maybe it was 6 hours.
I don't know.
Oh, 6.
Oh, man. I don't know anymore.
Just a lot of hours is what we're saying.
60 hours over 1 session. Okay, so the demigod Maui's tattoos actually play a really important role in the movie Moana. So maybe now when you watch Moana, if you watch it again, if you're inspired, you'll see these tattoos in like a more important light. I don't think Disney did a great job of explaining how important tattoos are to the culture of the Polynesian people. But this real practice did inspire all the tattoos on Maui, and those tattoos themselves were inspired by stories about Maui. And now I'm going to hand it off to Brian.
Well, thank you, Heather.
You're welcome, Brian.
I enjoyed your talk about tattoos.
Thank you. I'm going to enjoy your talk, I'm sure.
You're not sure.
I'm not sure.
What?
It could
your
be a
talk
horrible
on?
talk.
Wait,
I'm
because
going to talk. Oh, go ahead.
because
Zoe?
if you're not gonna mention this one tattoo thing, I'm gonna say it. Which now I don't think you are.
He is going to.
No, I don't think
Or-
you're going to.
Here's an idea. You could wait and see. And if I don't, then you can say the thing.
I think I want to say my thing.
But it's Dad's turn.
But Dad's talking about the mythology, right? This is not about mythology.
It's about Maui.
Yeah, no. I think it's just a little bit of trivia,
Go ahead,
you guys.
go
My whole
ahead.
job is just to look at IMDb trivia. Give me a break. Some of Maui's tattoos are based off The Rock's grandfather, who was also a pro wrestler.
Oh.
Some of
Yeah.
his real tattoos. That's all I wanted to say.
Okay. Okay. I was not going to say that.
I actually have
You're blowing my mind.
clarification about that, which is that actually quite specifically Maui's tattoos are hand drawn despite this being a computer animated movie, and that's the first time they did that in many, many years, having any kind of hand drawn part in a Disney movie.
Wow.
It's also the first time they've had any tattoos.
Really?
Yeah, even the pirates in Peter Pan didn't have tattoos. This is the first time they've depicted tattoos because they didn't want to
Make kids
contribute
want
to the
tattoos.
delinquency.
Of minors who are the ones.
Yeah, but
watching the
apparently
show.
now we can see that you're not delinquent.
Now
if
we're
you-
okay that if kids get tattoos.
Well, when you're 18, you can.
Sure.
Yeah, Moana was the first one to do like hand drawn like 2D animation since they started doing like it'll be the oh gosh, not since like Princess and the Frog, so not for like over 10 years I think had they done like hand-drawn
Oh my God,
elements.
The Princess and the Frog is 10 years ago.
Princess and the
at
Frog
least.
Princess and the Frog was 2009, so a little less than. But
What is happening to my life?
I know.
Where
I
is it
was
going?
I was like 5 years old when I was I can't do math. I was 8 years old. Not that young.
I
Wow.
hear you, dude.
But like hand-drawn
We oughta
animation
just
is
hang
like
it
a
up now.
thing of the past, but I love it, and I love that they chose to just do it specifically for Maui's tattoos.
Yes,
I used to
agree.
do gymnastics and capoeira, and now I do podcasting.
Yeah,
I sit in a
old.
chair and I talk.
I used to do pro wrestling.
Yeah. Did you have tattoos?
Not when I was pro wrestling, no.
No.
But now
you
I
have a
do.
tattoo now.
I do.
Talk about the significance of that.
a
Sure. My
froggy.
tattoo
And then put the picture online.
is of a toad and two mushrooms that look like the kind of mushrooms in a fairy tale book, and then some lavender around it. And to me, the significance of it, did I get it on my 45th birthday? I was going to look that up.
You
Like
got it
2
on
years
one of your-
ago,
yeah, that-
3 years
that
ago.
sounds right.
Was it that recent?
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
so. And to me, it's about that I like witchy things, that I'm a bit of a witch. It's kind of a Baba Yaga thing, you know.
Also kind of mana.
Yeah, that's right. It's about, I don't know, my childishness and my love of nature, which I think are important parts of me.
That's
Aw.
sweet.
I've always thought that, since the tattoo is permanent, and I feel bad for all the people who like got a tattoo from like a TV show they like or something, and then the TV show ended a way they didn't like, and then they have that
Oh,
tattoo
yes.
forever, or like they have a tattoo of a
Or
celebrity,
like people who named their child Khaleesi.
Speaking of Game of Thrones,
yeah, or just like, oh, I got a tattoo of blank actor who turned out to be a creep or whatever. Like I would need to make sure it's something that could never go bad.
Right.
Which is why I think my love of Shakespeare comes in handy, because, that's just old. Like, we've probably found out all we're gonna find. Like, if Shakespeare was secretly like a horrible person, I don't think we're gonna find out now.
Well, you do what you got to do, but you never know if it's a person.
Well,
Zoe,
it could turn out that toads are bad. Like it could turn. I could become
No,
a serial killer,
they
and then
can't.
Dad's tattoo is really gonna suck. But like,
Toads can't be bad.
my tattoo is going to reference you.
So you have to be
You
stay
can't go
good.
bad.
yeah, I won't break bad specifically for your sake. But my issue is being an actor. It's like it should be somewhere where no one can see it. But then why would you get a tattoo if no one can ever see it? So I'll figure it out.
Well, my grandfather, who was in the Navy, he had a tattoo. He had a couple tattoos. He might have had an anchor tattoo.
I was about to say, was it an anchor?
He might have had an anchor and like the name of his ship and maybe some other ones. I don't really remember right now. And my father, who was in the Army, he had a tattoo. And so I guess I'm just carrying on a little bit of a tradition that goes back to my grandpa.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay,
Oh,
Dad, I'll let you
but-
speak.
Okay, wait, I just have one more
Nobody's
thing.
going to let me
I
speak.
I once knew this lady. I was getting a pedicure, and this lady on her breast, which were kind of right up in her face, and right down by my feet. They were big, and right
They had to be big to be in your face and down by your feet.
they were in her face. But anyway, they were big enough that she really pretty big, like
Her boobs?
the size of my hand.
Wait, are you still talking about how big her boobs were?
We are still talking about the size of the breast
No.
of the woman doing her pedicure.
I have to explain. About the size of my hand, this tattoo is what I'm saying.
Okay.
She had a tattoo that was very big, and it said Randy
Oh no!
in cursive lettering. And
Did you ask her if she's ever visited England?
well, no, she said she was very rueful, and she was like, "Yeah, that was my ex's name.
Oh, no.
Never get the name of your ex tattooed. What?
Nobody gets the name of
Imagine
their
getting
ex
the name
tattooed.
of your ex tattooed.
Never get the name of your love tattooed on your body." And she said, "Well, but now I just say it means I'm Randy."
You know what? Go her, girl power. But that sucks.
That sucks. You have to be so careful, or don't.
So how big? Never mind.
How big were her breasts?
Big enough. She could have a tattoo
can't
the
air
size of my
that.
hand. Okay, Brian, now you can talk.
Okay.
If you're out there listening, lady with the Randy tattoo, I'm sure you're
I
very
love you.
beautiful.
You are.
Okay. So I'm going to talk about Maui. And it's probably pronounced with 3 syllables, Maui. He was a demigod, and his story is amazing. His story probably contains a larger number of unique and ancient myths than that of any other legendary character in the mythology of any nation that we know
Wow.
of ever.
That's awesome.
And
What are you basing that on?
research.
Like that said that, or that
Yes.
you just read so many, you're like, this has to be the most
No,
of
no, no,
anybody.
no. No, I read analyses
Okay.
of Maui and conclusions that
Well, that's
not
crazy
only-
because there's like a million stories just of Zeus having sex with people.
Yes, and I will qualify the largest number of unique and ancient myths that are a demigod
Right.
and directly applicable to people's everyday lives.
Oh, okay, I see.
So not just like
he-
Hercules.
The myths of Hercules. He did, all of the trials and everything. And really nothing he did benefited anybody else's life. It was just to do them. But Maui, he did all of this stuff, and the things that he did was of utility to the Polynesian people. The legends of Maui, they span thousands of miles and are told differently in various places following common themes. And because of this, historians and anthropologists were able to trace the migration patterns of the Polynesians through the stories of Maui.
Wow.
Oh, that's cool.
Where they're similar, where they're different, where we can tell like taxonomically how they branched off and recombined in place. Actually, they didn't recombine much. Mostly the peoples dispersed into their islands and stayed pretty much among themselves and didn't intermix much. So you can tell that the stories are compartmentalized and unique to each place. Like I said, Maui's deeds rank higher in class and range than any other demigod in any other religion and are of more utility. And so let's talk about some of those.
Hell yeah. Are you going to sing a whole song about all the things he did?
No. So, one of the things that Maui did was bring fire to humans. And that's in a lot of the different mythologies, but they approach it differently. The story of how he brings the fire to humans is different wherever you go. So for the Maori, I should preface all of this that Maui is a trickster. Consider
Right.
someone like Loki or any other mythological trickster, but imagine that the trickster is also a hero.
Mm-hmm.
It's somewhat a mismatch between the Western concept of a trickster and the Western concept of a hero that makes it difficult to make a movie like Moana that's true to this combined concept that exists in Polynesian mythology that doesn't mesh with the mythology that we have in the West. That it's difficult to be both of those things in a Western movie.
The hero and the trickster.
Yes.
Right.
And that happens in other, I mean, like the coyote in Native American mythologies
Right.
can be the like antagonizing in one story and totally the hero in the next. It's not like clean cut.
Yeah, but this isn't even a back and forth. As you'll see, Maui regularly uses his trickiness to trick gods in order to benefit humans. And the heroism is the result of being tricky.
That's cool.
It's like
I like
it's
that.
not a negative trait.
Right. So he was curious. He wanted to know where fire came from. And so in order to find this out, he put out all the fires on the island. So they have no fire. So that he has to go volunteer and ask the fire goddess Mahuika, who was his grandmother, for more fire. Mahuika lived in a cave in a burning mountain at the end of the earth. And she kept giving Maui her burning fingernails so that she'd give him a fingernail so that he could bring back and light fires and they'd have fire. But he kept putting them out and going back and saying, I need another one. And he'd put it out. And he'd go back. And she got mad. And she sent fire at him. But he called on the weather god Tahwiri Matea to put it out. which he did. And then she threw her last fire nail at him, but he ducked and it hit some trees. He brought the sticks from those trees back and taught the Maori how to rub those sticks together to get the fire out of them. And that's how he brought fire, which had been put into the tree. And that was the last of the fire of his grandmother, Mahuika, was in these sticks. And so now whenever they need fire, they have to get it out of the sticks.
That's so interesting.
Such a good story.
And that usually the end of these stories ends in rubbing sticks together, but it's how they got there.
Right.
It's like, how did humans learn to do this?
Hawaiian mythology, they regularly had to go to volcanoes to get fire and bring it back. And that was a long walk, and Maui didn't want to have to do that, and he knew of some birds who knew the secret of fire. So he captured the leader of those birds and forced him to tell. And he was informed how to rub sticks together, and he brought that back. In Samoa, Maui was also named Ti'iti'i, and his father Talaga worked for the earthquake god Mafue in the underworld. So Maui snuck in to his father's job in the underworld. And his father saw him, that he had snuck in, and told him to behave and be quiet. Instead of doing that, Maui went to go see Mafue to ask for fire, and he was given fire. But Maui built a stone oven, an umu, to cook taro using the fire, and that was forbidden. Mafue got angry because people aren't supposed to cook and blew out the fire and smashed the oven. Mafue punished Maui by making him engage in a duel with Mafue.
Ooh.
Maui won the duel and broke off Mafue's right arm and then caught the left and was going to break the left arm too. To keep Maui from breaking his remaining arm, Mafue offered Maui 100 wives. Maui refused. He doesn't want 100 wives. Mafue offered the secret of fire. Maui accepted and learned that it was hidden inside of trees. And if you rub them together, the fire comes out. And he took that up to the world. So all these different versions of the story lead to the same thing, that Maui is the one that gave people both fire and the concept of cooking.
Right.
So another classification of story is pulling up the islands from the sea, which they do reference in the movie about how he pulled up the islands from the sea. And in the movie, while I was watching it, the most recent time, they showed the islands being pulled up from the sea. They animate that. And it became clear to me, at least, where the myths probably came from, because they're an ocean-faring people, and they're sailing and discovering islands. But as they discover the islands, as they're sailing, the islands are coming up out of the sea from their perspective, and they're being raised up in front of them. They don't know the earth is round. They just know that these islands are popping up in front of them. Now, it may not be true, but it seems truthy.
That's how you liked it. Yeah. That's how you were thinking about it.
So in the myths, in the Maori myth, Maui had brothers who wouldn't let him fish with them. But he stows away on their boat with his magic fish hook. And then his brothers are upset with him for stowing aboard. They won't give him any bait. So he uses blood from his nose. He pricks his nose with the fish hook and uses blood from his nose as bait and pulls up the North Island of New Zealand. Or the way it was phrased, he pulls up a fish that was the North Island of New Zealand, Te Ika a Maui. And in some stories, his canoe, his waka, became the South Island, which is called Te Waka a Maui. In Hawaii, again, his brothers won't let him fish, but they're maybe not as good at it. They go by themselves and they catch a shark. And he says, "One shark, I would have caught more." And so his brothers take him out to prove that he's a better fisherman. So Maui baited his magic hook with alai birds, which are sacred to his mother Hina. and started pulling up islands. But he told his brothers they have to paddle fast away and don't look back. And if they look back, then the fish would run away. And so they do that. The brothers are paddling really hard, and he's pulling up islands. And eventually, one of the brothers can't take it anymore, and he looks back. Kind of a Persephone thing, I guess. And the line snaps. And that's the end of the Hawaiian Islands.
Ah.
They would have gotten more. And I looked it up. There are 8 main Hawaiian islands, but there are 137 total, going all the way past Midway. The chain is very long. Geologically, there's a hot spot under the water, and the tectonic plates move, but that hot spot stays where it is. So it keeps the volcanoes keep moving in a line and create this long line of volcanic islands. But the older they are, the more they've eroded. So the Big Island is the newest, and it's still active. And as it goes away from that hot spot, it's been eroded more and more, and they get smaller and smaller.
Zoe, I saw the volcanoes on the Big Island.
That's awesome.
Yeah, when I
would
was a
love
teenager.
to go back to Hawaii because I was so young when we went that I don't really remember it.
I think that's the last time I scuba dived.
Yeah.
Is when we were there when Zoe was a little kid, and I got to dive with this big sea turtle that came right up to me.
Oh,
it
wow.
was so nice. So that's Hawaii. In the Tongan tradition, he pulled up islands, but it's separate. He pulled up the coral islands with his hook. The volcanic islands fell down from the heavens. That wasn't Maui. But
okay.
So they're separate. They're different types of islands in Tonga. So that's stories about him pulling up islands. Also, he slowed the sun or regulated the sun and made it compatible with agriculture. In the Maori tradition, the sun used to go too fast. And Maui and his brothers took a magic jawbone and some rope east to where Tamanuetera, the sun god, slept. And hearing the start of this story, I absolutely thought, okay, tie the jawbone to the rope, lasso the sun god, and pull to slow him down. Nope, that's not what happened.
That's what I thought you were going to say too.
Yeah, it seems like it, right? Based on, we're being MacGyver here. We know what we have to work with, and we know what we want to accomplish, and that seems like the way. But no. He made a snare out of the rope and hid behind a wall of clay that he built. They caught the sun god in the noose, and Maui beat him with the jawbone until he agreed to go more slowly across the sky.
That's how they... I love that. Thinking outside the box, Mr.
I don't know.
Maui.
That's the default solution. You have a hammer and some nails, and you need to build a house. What do you do? I hit somebody who knows how to build a house with a hammer until he agrees to build the house.
Well, maybe they didn't use whatever rope and jawbones to hook things. Maybe they used it to hit things, and they use rope to make snares, and so that's why.
Maybe I use rope and jawbones to hit things.
to grab the sun god.
to grab the sun god and make him go slower. In the Hawaiian tradition, the sun was erratic and unpredictable, making it hard to farm. Maui made snares from his hair to trap the sun god and make it move more regularly.
His beautiful hair.
Yep. In Tahiti, Maui was a priest working at the Mala'e, the sacred place, and the sun was getting low and his work was unfinished for the day. So he took hold of the hihi, the sun's rays, and stopped it for a while. I guess somehow he could hold it with one hand and work with the other hand.
Mm-hmm. Very strong.
Yeah.
Strong man.
So
maybe he worked with his feet.
Yeah, there we go.
Maybe so.
Or catch the sun rays and then step on them, freeing your hands.
Yeah, hold it
Continue
down.
work.
I'm glad we're unpacking how this would really work.
So finally, stories of his death.
What?
Yep.
No.
Yep. There are stories of Maui's death.
No, I don't want Maui to be dead.
What is dead may
It
never
was a
die?
heroic death. Okay? At least an attempt to be heroic. He died for people, which were the people he lived for. As the he died as a result of being a trickster. He wanted to make mankind immortal. So,
Classic blunder.
yeah, this is a fun one. He went to Hine Nui Tepo, changed into a worm. Hine Nui Tepo was a goddess. Changed into a worm and crawled into her vagina.
Or what?
Oh, he did?
Her vagina.
It sounded like you said vagina.
Like the place in Canada?
Is there a
I'm
place
sorry.
in Canada called Vagina?
I'm sorry.
I haven't heard of that place.
I'm dying over this story right now.
Please
Oh
go
my
on.
God. Oh my
Okay.
god.
Now I need to know. You said heroic.
Well, he's doing this to try to make people immortal, okay? The idea being
Calling
that her heart holds the key to immortality, and he's going to steal her heart.
That's how he
But
plans to get
to
there.
her- I mean, that's what they always say. The way to a woman's heart is through.
Oh my god.
Yep. The plan,
He doesn't just try to woo her or hit her with a jawbone.
Or,
Nope.
I don't know, crawl
Okay.
in her mouth or her ear or something.
All right.
well, the plan is to crawl out her mouth while she's sleeping. That's how he's going to get out.
Oh
All
my
right, so clearly you
gosh.
can't go in the same way.
But he never gets that far.
Oh, no.
He never
Because
gets that
that's
far.
not how anatomy works.
Oh, no, this is totally accurate to how anatomy works because he is crushed by the obsidian teeth in her vagina.
Oh, yeah.
Yes. Yes, he is. Sorry, Maui, but I'm pro vagina
Vagina
dentata.
dentata.
Now, there are other stories that have him going into and out of her mouth and being chomped in half by obsidian teeth in her mouth.
Which makes
But that's not
But you
the
knew
more
we were going to like
interesting
this
story.
one.
I'm
What's her name?
thrilled.
Her name is Hine Nui Tepo.
Awesome.
Why was this not in the Disney movie is what I'm going to ask. Because that is an amazing story that I think should have been included in his little rap song about things he did.
It was originally in the movie, but they couldn't reconcile that with the fact that he needs to be alive for the movie.
Yeah, that would be the big problem with telling that story.
And so he gets eaten by her obsidian teeth.
Vagine.
Yep. And he dies, and that's the end of the story.
Aww.
You're like, and what
Well,
happens after he dies?
Yeah, I mean, what is this? What's the symbolism? What is she the goddess of? Like immortality?
Given immortality to
Let me
humans?
see.
Well, I mean,
I
it's
mean-
a classic. It's like a Promethean. Like,
Yeah, there's a lot of
just
Prometheus
overstepped a little.
in this.
Hine Nui Tepo means great woman of the night, a goddess of night.
Well, I mean, sometimes the night
And
does
she-
just chomp you up.
She receives the spirits of humans when they die.
Oh, so
So take her heart, and she can't receive the spirits, and you live forever, maybe.
okay, but then he's he's not fully a god; he's a demigod, so he can die, and so then that's where.
Who is his
He would
godly
be anyways.
parent?
Well, Dad said Hine at one point, and there's
Yeah.
different stories because Hine is also his wife in some stories. It's kind of
That's fair. There's a lot
right.
of mythologies of like brother, sister, husband, wife gods and stuff like
well,
that. That just
more just
change
that in
by-
some places it was his sister, in some places it was his wife. Not
Yeah,
that he was
makes
both
sense.
sister and wife.
Right, just like all these stories have lots of details that differ from place to place, and that's another one.
Right. Okay.
So, the depiction of Maui in Moana is not without controversy. So, the biggest one, the one most called out, was Maui's weight.
Right.
He's not supposed to be obese, he's supposed to be lean and muscular, most often depicted as a lithe teenager on the verge of manhood.
Just want to make him more like The Rock, maybe.
Yeah. Well, now-
or more.
To me, I think I could sort of forgive the age thing because in the movie they go out of the way he talks about all of his accomplishments and they're in the past and he's been kind of retired for a while. So maybe it's been some years and he's not a teenager anymore.
And they
He's an
don't
adult
want
now.
anyone like thinking that he could
Shipping
get with
them.
Moana because this is not about romance and if
Oh,
there's
that's
a
a good
teen
point,
boy
too.
there with her.
Yeah. But also, obesity is a stereotype of Pacific Islanders. The Oceanic Story Trust says that they they tried to emulate the body of the strongest strongman competitors. They weren't going for obese; they were going for the strongest people they could
Yeah,
find.
it seems muscular. I mean, overweight but muscular. You
Yeah,
know.
it kept
But
going.
it's just not what Maui's supposed to look
Yeah.
like. And you don't have to be, if you're magical, you don't have to be
Mhm.
have the body of the strongest man. Like you don't have to say like, "Oh, Athena was supposed to be like this, so we need to make her the strongest looking woman." Like, if they're magical or
Right.
deities, they can have a variety of body
Yeah.
shapes. And it's the godlike powers that make them so powerful.
Yeah,
There's no amount of muscles you can have that let you pull up an island.
Right.
I don't know. I feel like a few more weeks in the gym. And he was smaller to begin with, and they kept iterating through. And the Oceanic Story Trust kept adding mass to him, because when they saw it animated, they're like, you don't look at this guy and instantly say, now that's a guy that's super duper strong. And they kept adding hair and mass to his body. At first, he was bald, like The Rock. He looked more like The Rock. And they added hair slowly until he had this long hair that he ends up with in the movie.
Yeah, I heard that the hair was very important because it's kind of a Samson Delilah type of thing. There's a lot of mana in his hair, and so when they originally had him be bald like The Rock, Polynesian folks were like, "What? Like that's not it at all. Where's his hair? He has to have hair." And so they put a lot of hair on, like a ton, and then the people were what I read was that they kind of laughed, but they're like, sure, let's go with that. That is a lot of hair. And we think it really shows a lot of
More
mana. And that's a way, I guess, having the muscles was trying to show visually right off the bat, hey, this guy's really strong.
Like
so that you don't
having-
have to.
Like how having a lot of hair would show mana.
Yeah. They wanted a character that people would see and at a glance see godly strength.
But it's like in things but in like depictions of Hercules, like he's usually muscular, but they don't need to find a bodybuilder type for us to
Right,
believe that Hercules is strong.
Right. Hercules just has like a big,
Like
like a
pecs.
V shape, an upside down triangle type of look.
Well, The Rock literally played Hercules, so look at his body.
Oh, right.
Okay, so now attitude. I touched on this, that Maui is not comedic or frivolous. He's a trickster, but a serious trickster. And maybe white people have no practical experience in depicting a serious, noble, heroic trickster.
Right, it has to
you
be
know,
like
we
kind
have,
of cocky and
We have Loki, we have Autolycus. None of them are heroic and serious. They have different attributes. Maybe they just couldn't do it, couldn't write it, or maybe when they wrote it, it didn't test well. I don't have information on how that went. I mean, I doubt they wrote it and it didn't test well, because so much of the movie is his character. They didn't rewrite the whole movie and reanimate everything and write new songs and all that. They did this to begin with. They wanted to do it this way. And then also the intelligence. It's not clear in the movie that Maui is highly intelligent, and he's supposed to be. The final thing I have, the final mistake that Disney clearly made, and this absolutely could have been rethought and undone, was the Maui Halloween costume.
Oh.
Yeah.
what's the I've never seen one. What's the
well-
Maui Halloween costume?
Maui's clothes in the movie are basically a grass skirt and a necklace.
Mhm.
That's what he wears. The rest of him is just
His
him, his skin
body.
and his tattoos. So to make a Halloween costume that looked like him, they made a full bodysuit with the tattoos, with the brown skin.
Ooh, so there might be
And,
like white little kids walking around.
With brown skin and tattoos.
Brown skin and
That's
tattoos.
not
And so
good.
you run into accusations of brownface.
Yeah.
And the tattoos. Only people with physical or spiritual connection to Polynesians should have them. And then the tattoos should be unique. And that makes them antithetical to printing on a costume and having everyone wear the same exact
Yeah, it's like
tattoos.
really not getting the sacredness of any of this, of
Yeah.
the fact that he is a demigod to them, or the tattoos, or any of it.
Yeah.
And then brown face, yeah.
Yeah. And okay, so maybe just having the parts that cover the naughty bits and the necklace, maybe that doesn't make for a good costume. Maybe Maui doesn't make a good costume, and you don't have to have that for every character if it's inappropriate.
Well, they took it down. After the bad feedback, they took it away.
That's
So
good.
And
that's good.
And that's the end of my story.
All right.
Just like the end of Maui's story, it ends with being chopped in half.
Swallowed up. Munched upon.
That was such a surprise story, and I like it.
Me
Yep,
too.
it really was a surprise when he taught people to rub sticks together to make fire.
Making that
Well,
fire.
I have, along with my usual dose of little trivia facts, which are weirder because this is an animated movie, so there's not a ton of like, oh man, wasn't it crazy when
When the actors got
Rock
together and they
did
all
that
got sick?
stunt? Right.
True story. The visuals are animated, but the when they did the voices, that's live action.
That's live action, man. So along with a couple of those notes, I'm actually going to talk about the music, because this is a beautifully scored show, and I
listened to
love
it
the music
yesterday.
so
was
much.
anybody famous involved with the music in any way?
Oh, I don't know. Mark Mancina, composer of lots of films and shows like Speed, Bad Boys, Twister, Tarzan, Criminal Minds, Brother Bear, and more. So just the most random collection of things. He was like the veteran that they brought in. It was
He
a
worked with Phil
trifecta.
Collins at least a couple times. Then.
It was a trifecta. So it was this Mark Mancina, it was Lin-Manuel Miranda, who was pulled into this project before Hamilton.
Wow.
Hamilton was like in the works, like he had pitched it, but it had
Wow.
not become a show yet. And there's a quote from someone being like, he told us what it was about, and I was like, oh great, then we'll have him to ourselves because that's not going to get picked up.
Aw.
And then he had to do like a ton of the work, like from literally calling and FaceTiming him from like the dressing room during Hamilton.
Wow.
But he signed on to this project first. So it was those two, and then it was this man called Opataya Foai, from and his band called Tevaka. And they're a contemporary Polynesian band. And so the three of them worked together to create the music. So on Lin-Manuel Miranda's side, he was like inspired to start writing music in some ways by The Little Mermaid. He said like the song Under the Sea, like that really got him. He'd never heard anything like that in a Disney movie before, and it made him want to start writing. And he got this job with Ron Clements and John Musker, who are the co-directors, and they did The Little Mermaid, and they did Aladdin, and they did Hercules. And so he like got to work with them, who he, as a child was inspired by. And he got this job the same day he found out he was going to be a father. So very good day for him, I assume.
Yeah.
But he also mentioned the Story Trust. So he said like they show every screening and play every song for these people to make sure they got it right. The quote, he said, to make sure we weren't like, okay, here's some stuff from this culture and here's a movie, but really making sure the themes of the movie resonated with that part of the world.
Yeah, I did hear that they pushed back at different times. They were saying like, no, you would never wear red in the water like that.
Mm-hmm.
No, you would like these houses should look like this. No, you wouldn't juggle coconuts because they're very sacred. So there was a pushback from the Oceanic Story Trust on some cases at least.
Right. Well, Opataya was born in Samoa, and he immigrated to New Zealand, and he started this band Te Vaka, who are now like they're known as one of the South Pacific's most influential cultural and musical ambassadors. So they're like a really big deal.
I was listening to them
It's
the other day.
beautiful. He said, like, I was born in Samoa in a hut, and his like journey to be here is really really cool. He ended up so he was writing with Tavaka before Moana, and one of the things he did to kind of learn he like Tavaka tells a lot of stories of like his seafaring ancestors. So he said that he would go and visit all the different communities in the South Pacific and find the oldest people that he could and get them to tell him their stories so he could write music about it. And that was kind of why
Wow.
he made the band, to tour the world and to tell the stories that he learned. And so he signed on for Moana, and he wrote like most of the music. So he wrote "We Know the Way" on the plane ride home
That's-
from Burbank when he was right after he was
Aw.
first introduced to the project. And then
That's my
Lin-Manuel
favorite
Miranda
one.
added the English lyrics, but that's him singing on it too, I think.
Yes.
Yeah. And I mean, it's beautiful. Here's something he said about that song in particular. "We Know the Way" means so much to me because it matched the power and the confidence that these ancestors had when they sailed the seas. You can't help but be taken when you hear that song with the animation. I think people who are from the South Pacific will really feel a sense of pride rise up when we hear this song. We do feel like we're representing the South Pacific. So when we went to record at Warner Brothers Studio in Burbank, it felt like we're taking our ancestors with us. And I'm really, really glad that, like, I mean, Lin-Manuel Miranda is an incredible artist and musician, but I'm really glad that it was spearheaded or, strongly
Influenced.
led by actual South Pacific indigenous artists.
Well, that's my favorite song is "We Know the Way." And
Yeah.
I was listening to the Moana soundtrack last night, I guess, when I was
Yeah,
cooking
it was
dinner.
last night.
And I was like, I'm not going to cry when that song comes on. I'm not even watching the movie. I'm not going to cry.
Foolish.
And then I was like, I don't know what it is. I'm like, this gets me in some weird way where I always feel like I'm going to cry when
It's
I
that
hear
meme.
it.
Listen to Moana. Try not to cry. Cry a lot.
Well, he went with his wife, Julie, who's also the manager of the band, and they went to the secluded area in New Zealand called Waihi and wrote. And it had no electricity. It had just like he said it had a river running through it, lots of animals running around, and just a log drum. And so he just like wrote a ton of songs in nature, and for like 3 to 4 months. And it was all like happening very fast because it was a movie, but they went on this almost like wilderness retreat and just wrote and wrote. And I have some really interesting facts about like how they made this music, because here's something that Julie Foahi said. South Pacific music originally has no melodies. There are a lot of chants and rhythms, which makes it very different. So what they did, because they were like trying to draw on like these original South Pacific sounds, but there aren't like necessarily just traditional melodies to draw on. It's a lot more rhythm. They used the rhythm and the sound of different Pacific languages like Samoan, Tokelauan,
Oh.
and Tuvaluan. And the sound and the rhythm of those languages influence the song rhythms.
Oh, wow.
To try to find a way to like make it work with like these songs had to have melodies. But he said that the 3 elements that Opataya really pushed were chants, lots of drums, and the telling of the stories of ancient Polynesia. Like drums, percussions, and keys, and like that's the stuff that comes from. That's like the ancestral stuff, not any kind of like melody.
Yeah.
That's awesome. That's really cool.
His like instrument of choice is just a box or a wooden floor. And he said whenever we get together with Lynn or Mark and they say do something with the song, I always ask for a box, because he believed that you can really find the soul of a tune just by feeling on a box, and
Wow.
from there we expand, he said. So it was very rooted in rhythm, the rhythm of the languages, the percussion, which is you can tell when you're listening to it. I mean, it has beautiful melodies, but it makes a lot of sense now that I know that it's like grounded in chant and percussion. And he was saying like you hear a lot of like a
Yeah,
lot
I'm
of like
thinking about that.
non-verbal, yeah. um
Now I
so
want to listen to the soundtrack again.
I know.
I just heard it yesterday, but it's so good.
So it was that, and then like Lin on some of the English lyrics, which are also beautiful, and like so many people that worked with Lin-Manuel Miranda, like Chris Jackson, who he was in The Heights, he was in Hamilton, and he was in this. And it's funny because all the demos, I don't know if, dear listeners, you should please listen to the demos for Moana, because it is Lin-Manuel Miranda and Chris Jackson and Philippa Sue on them, all just I think on the extended edition on Spotify, that are so fun as you see them like try to figure out the harmonies and all of that. The first draft of the screenplay, though, I think this is a fun fact. I don't know if you guys knew this. The first draft of this screenplay for Moana was written by Taika Waititi.
I did know.
And there's
because I have to keep up on all of the Taika stuff.
Right. There's Taika-verse people in this too. I mean, there's Jermaine Clements, and there's the woman that was also in Thor Ragnarok that he has in like every project, who's super
Right.
cool.
She was also in Hunt for the Wilder
Right.
People, and
Yeah, Rachel House. That's her, right? Yeah. So Jermaine Clements and Rachel House from the kind of like New Zealand actor squad that are kind of involved with Taika Waititi and What We Do in the Shadows and all of that kind of group.
yeah, she's Maori descent.
Yeah, all the at least main characters, maybe, yeah, every main cast member is of Polynesian descent except for Alan Tudyk, who plays Hey the chicken.
Actually, the guy who did the voice of the chief, Moana's dad, is the same guy who plays Boba Fett now in Mandalorian.
Oh.
That's
That
the original
actor.
guy who played Boba Fett, right?
Right. That's the same actor who did the voice
That's very
of
cool. I did not
Moana's
know
dad.
that.
Well, original.
Well, well, let me tell you a few other non-musical fun facts. There were some, like tributes in this movie. Tamatoa was a tribute to David Bowie.
Yeah, you can totally.
Oh yeah,
tell.
and Jermaine Clement lives it up in that role.
I mean, it sounds like a Bowie song.
So good. And the Kakamora chase sequence was inspired by Mad Max Fury Road, which you can also totally tell.
Yes.
And I love it because that's the kind of thing that like probably most like 7-year-olds who are watching this haven't seen Fury Road, but that one's in there for for the older kids. And there was a lot of stuff. There was a lot of like symbology and that were drawn from different Polynesian cultures. So like the spiral that's on the necklace and on the sail of her boat is, I don't want to pronounce this wrong, but kore, Kore, and it is like a symbology of an unfurling fern. And so it's like new life and new beginnings and hope and a new start and rejuvenation and all of that. And it's a double spiral, which also means kinship and belonging. So that's like what's
That's
on the sail of her
beautiful.
ship.
Mm-hmm.
Her island is Moto Nui, and Moto is island and Nui is big. Te Ka means the fiery, and Te Fiti means the shiny or shining.
Shiny.
Pretty on the nose, but it works. And then when she gets this like abrasion on her foot after she gets like her first try going out that doesn't quite work. I think that's when it happens. The abrasion is in the shape of the Hawaiian island archipelago.
Oh.
So there's a lot
Wow.
of cute little
Yeah, a lot
call-outs
I didn't
there.
notice that.
I mean, and since it's a Disney movie, they also just have like Sven the reindeer is in a frame, and like just a bunch of stuff from other Disney movies pops up in the animation. I think
The
the moment
Easter
where
eggs.
she like sits up is like just the exact same animation as Anna sitting up out of bed in Frozen. But that kind of trivia is is fun, and you can look it up, but I won't tell you all of it here. That is most of my stuff I had to tell you guys. I just love the music of this movie.
Yes, thanks for telling me about it.
It's so beautiful.
All right, well, that was our inspired by true events and some mythology of Moana. I hope you enjoyed, and we will be coming at you with a mini-sode next week.
That sounds very aggressive.
Coming right at you.
Coming
at me.
We're not just gonna sidle up.
Oh, hey, Mom. What do we have another little fake one or no? Nope. That's the face of a woman that did not prepare anything.
Well, I mean, I could talk about
how well do we trust our abilities to improv?
I could talk about the true events that inspired the movie Battlefield Earth, the Scientology-inspired movie starring John Travolta as a very tall alien with dreadlocks, maybe, and how it's inspired by the concept that aliens came to Earth inside modern day jets, even though it was in the past before humans really existed, and they crashed into a volcano, and henceforth were not able to anymore see their leader, the clam-like Xenu.
Usually we do fake stuff for this, but this is actually what Scientologists believe, right?
No.
This is just straight up what Scientologists believe.
This is absolutely made up, and you're just
those
messing
two things
with us.
are not
Just
mutually
making this stuff up.
exclusive.
I don't believe a word of this.
You don't believe me that that's what it's about?
I think you're just making this up.
If I thought that was true, I probably wouldn't tell someone until they were way too deep into my pyramid scheme to
You know what?
to question it.
I don't want to be considered a suppressive person, so I'm not going to talk anymore about this. But if you want to know about it, go online and search.
Read Going Clear.
Clambake.
Or it was Xenu.net. It was Operation Clambake.
Not that we know anything about this. And I did just make that up. It's totally fake.
Oh, yeah.
Totally fake.
Mm-hmm. Also, Mom, do you have anything to plug?
Do I?
I don't know. Do either of you have anything to plug?
No,
The
I don't
Rock
have anything
doesn't
to
care if you have anything to plug.
Well done. Well done, child.
Sorry, I just needed to do a Rock bit once.
I'm fine with that.
There you go.
Stay tuned to the end of the episode to hear Brian sing a lovely song. Like Film Fam, inspired by true events, subscribe to hear more stories that inspired our favorite films.
For photos and links from the show and other shenanigans, follow us on Instagram at FilmFamPodcast, on Twitter at FilmFam_podcast, or on Facebook at FilmFam Inspired by True Events.
If you have any questions, comments, corrections, we never need corrections.
Oh gosh, I bet we do.
Corrections or films whose inspiration you would like us to explore, you can email us at filmfampodcast@gmail.com.
Thank you, Brian. Thank you, Zoe. Thank you all for listening. See you next time.
Goodbye.
Bye!
Got chaotic near the end there.
That was a bit chaotic good. Hey, everybody. This is Your Tattoo by Jonathan Colton. Black and blue. Every time I lean into you, you think the words don't mean what they do, killing me so slow. So it's home instead. Memorize your scars in the bed, making me see stars in my head. Baby, you don't know. One rough summer and too much sun, the lines get blurry and the colors run, and the red bleeds out with the blue. Secret in the shape of the way it hurt, planning an escape from beneath your shirt. Do you know I love your tattoo? Your tattoo. your tattoo. You were there, little sparks of wire in the air, everything on fire everywhere, punishment and crime. Black and white, it's keeping me up late every night, thinking I can't wait, but I might, everything in time. Gray gives way to the deepest black, promises you made and can't take back. When you look too long, you see through. Over on the edge where the ink is thin, coming up close against your skin. Do you know I love your tattoo? Your tattoo. Your tattoo.